Welcome to Life Stories, where we dive deep into real-life experiences, lessons, and moments of triumph. Today, we bring you a powerful tale of betrayal, resilience, and justice. A family gathering that took an unexpected turn when a cousin's jealousy led to sabotage. Only for the truth to come to light in the most surprising way. It's a story of standing up for yourself, confronting your demons, and reclaiming what was once lost. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and join us as we begin today's story. It had been a while since we all gathered at my parents' house, years. In fact, our family, large as it was, had always been a mix of warmth, laughter, food, and a dash of something unspoken. It was something in the air, an undercurrent that only those of us in the family could feel. Though no one ever acknowledged it outright. We were a close-knit bunch, but also caught in the web of expectations, unspoken comparisons, and, sometimes, a quiet sense of competition. And then there was Emma, my cousin. We grew up together, played together, went to the same school, and shared the same dreams. Our bond was supposed to be that of childhood camaraderie. But life always has a way of turning things upside down. In every household, there is always one person who seems to have it all, effortlessly. For us, that person was Emma. She was always the one who had the charm, the grace, the achievements. She was the one everyone spoke about in glowing terms, the one who was destined for success. And then there was me, the quiet one, the one who worked in the background, always a little overlooked, always striving but never quite matching up to the shining star that was Emma. But last year, something changed. I got a job in corporate Chicago, a big one, at a company I had always admired. The surprise was palpable, not just from my family but from me too. I had worked hard for it, never expecting it to happen. Yet it did. I remember the night I got the offer letter, sitting alone in my apartment, tears in my eyes. It felt surreal. I was finally doing something, achieving something. Even if it wasn't part of the script my family had written for me. It wasn't just the job that took me by surprise, it was the promotion. After only a year, my boss put me up for a significant promotion. The news was like a dream. I had stayed late, taken on extra projects, put everything I had into making my work the best. Everyone in my department seemed to think I was the obvious choice for the role. I thought it was a given. But when the call came, and my boss told me, "We've decided to go in a different direction," my heart sank. The sting of rejection was sharp. But I tried to move on. What else could I do? But what came next crushed me. The promotion wasn't just given to anyone, it was given to Emma. I didn't even know she worked at my company. I had no idea she had been up for the same position. It stung. It wasn't just that she got the job. It was the fact that, once again, she was the golden child. And here I was, the invisible one in the background, just trying to make my way. The weekend came, and our family gathered at my parents' house for one of our usual get-togethers. I hadn't seen Emma since I found out she'd taken my promotion. I wasn't looking forward to it. The thought of sitting across from her, pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't, felt unbearable. But that's what families do. They put on a facade. Don't they? As I sat at the dining table, chatting with a few relatives, Emma found me. She approached with that familiar smirk on her face. The one that made my skin crawl. I had been dreading this moment all week. I had no idea how she would act, or what she might say. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "How's work?" my aunt asked me, the question simple enough. Before I could even answer, Emma's voice cut in, dripping with the kind of sweetness that made it feel insincere. "Oh, you mean my job?" she said, swirling her glass of wine as though she owned the room. "The one I stole?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Loud and cold, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Some of the others chuckled, thinking she was joking, but I wasn't laughing. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking, though I forced myself to keep it steady. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so only a few of us could hear. I sent fake emails from your account to HR. She said, her voice light, almost mocking. Made you look like a real nightmare. Told them you were bad-mouthing your boss. Talking about quitting. All kinds of stuff. Guess they didn't want someone like that leading the team. My heart stopped. I could feel the anger building up in me. But I didn't let it show. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I took a deep breath instead. That's funny, I said with a smile I barely recognized as my own. Because HR just sent me these emails from you. The room went deathly silent. Emma's smirk faded as she saw the folder I pulled from my bag. The one that contained the evidence. I opened the folder slowly, carefully, as if savoring the moment. The weight of it felt almost surreal. The papers inside were more than just pieces of paper, they were the proof. The evidence of everything Emma had done. And I could almost hear the pounding of my heart in my ears as I flipped to the first page. That's funny, I said again, my voice steady now, because HR just sent me these emails from you. I watched as Emma's face changed. Her smile faltered for a moment before it quickly transformed into an expression of disbelief. She looked around the table, as if searching for a way out. But there was no escape now. The quiet buzz of conversation around the table died completely as everyone realized that something serious was happening. My uncle, who was sitting across from me, furrowed his brow. He grabbed the papers from my hands and started scanning them. His eyes widened with each line he read. Then, he passed them to my father. I saw the color drain from his face as he read through them. His jaw tightening with each new revelation. The evidence was undeniable. There it was. Every fake email. Every fabricated lie. The language was unmistakable. The phrasing too similar to Emma's own style. It was as if she had used a script. Each word carefully chosen to create the perfect narrative of a disgruntled employee. But the most damning evidence was the signature and the IP address, both of which led straight back to her. And then, as if on cue, Emma's mother leaned in, squinting at the papers, her expression unreadable. She could have denied it, could have played it off as a mistake. But the silence in the room made it clear that no one was buying the act anymore. And then, just as I thought the worst was over, the door creaked open behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. I recognized the cold, professional tone before I even saw him. Miss Emma. Mr. Callahan's voice rang out across the room, his tone void of emotion. Would you like to explain why these emails were sent from your company-issued laptop? The room froze. My uncle's face went pale. And I could see the anger start to build in my father's eyes. Emma's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't speak. Her wine glass, once held with such confidence, was now perched on the edge of the table, her fingers shaking. I don't know what this is. Emma stammered, trying to pull herself together. Her voice barely above a whisper. This isn't real. Mr. Callahan didn't flinch. We had our IT department investigate. He said calmly, it's very real. Every single email came from your company laptop. Your home Wi-Fi. Your work account was logged in at the time. You didn't even try to cover your tracks. Emma's face drained of color. And the room seemed to close in around her. Her mother's eyes were wide with disbelief. Her hands trembling. Emma's father, my uncle, looked like he was about to have a breakdown. He snatched the papers from my father, flipping through them with increasing disbelief. No, Emma said, her voice rising in panic. No, this is a mistake. But it was too late. Mr. Callahan was already pulling out his phone. Oh, and by the way, he said, his voice suddenly cutting through the tension. I recorded everything you just said a minute ago. He pressed play. Emma's voice filled the room. Clear as day. I sent fake emails from your account to our. Made you look like a real nightmare. Gasps filled the room. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth. And my dad swore under his breath. My uncle's face turned an ashen gray. Emma stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to process what was happening. But the truth was right there, out in the open. Undeniable. I was just kidding. She blurted out, her words frantic now. It was a joke. I didn't actually do it. I was just messing with you. No one in the room believed her. The lies were too thick. And the truth was too glaring. Emma's mother began to cry, her shoulders shaking as if the weight of her daughter's betrayal was too much to bear. Her father, on the other hand, was silent, staring at Emma like he was seeing her for the first time. His face twisted in anger, disappointment, and something darker. My heart pounded in my chest. I stayed calm, watching as the world Emma had built around her began to collapse. For once, she wasn't the golden child anymore. And now, Mr. Callahan said, his voice cold and final, we have all the proof we need. The room was dead silent. I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on me. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from Emma. She was no longer the confident woman who had walked in, her eyes glinting with her usual smugness. Now, she looked vulnerable, trapped in her own web of lies. Her eyes darted between Mr. Callahan, my father, and the rest of the family. But there was no escape. I could see the panic rise in her. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. The kind of fear that only comes when someone realizes they've lost everything. The room had shifted, and the spotlight was no longer on her shining achievements. No longer on her charisma, her beauty, or the way she had always been the family's darling. Now, she was exposed. She had nowhere to hide. Her mother, her unwavering supporter for as long as I could remember, was crying. She wiped her eyes, trying to stem the flow of tears. But the truth was too much for her to bear. Emma's father was pacing now, his face tight with anger and disbelief. His voice was quiet but steady when he spoke, as though trying to suppress the storm of emotions inside him. Emma, he said, his voice breaking with the weight of his words. Tell me you didn't do this. But she didn't answer. She just sat there, frozen, her face pale. The room had become a battlefield, with emotions flying like shrapnel. My heart was racing. I had been pushed to the brink, and every fiber of my being screamed for justice. I wanted to shout, to scream at her, to make her feel the hurt she had caused me. But I held myself back. I had to remain composed. And then, in the midst of the chaos, Emma made one final, desperate attempt to escape the consequences. She turned to me, her eyes wide with a mix of pleading and defiance. You set me up, she spat, her voice filled with venom. You wanted revenge. You just couldn't handle the fact that I got the job and you didn't. This is all because of you. I stared at her in disbelief. The nerve, after everything she had done. She was still trying to twist the narrative, trying to make herself the victim in this whole mess. I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It wasn't filled with anger, either. It was simply a response to the absurdity of her words. You admitted to it, Emma, in front of all of us. I said, my voice cold. Don't try to turn this around on me. You did this to yourself. Her expression shifted for a moment, and I could see the flicker of something, perhaps shame or guilt, flash in her eyes. But it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. Stop it, she snapped, her voice trembling now. This is harassment. You're all ganging up on me. You're humiliating me. But this time, no one came to her defense. The family, once her greatest supporters, stood silent. There was no sympathy left for her. No one to stand in her corner. My uncle, a lawyer, began to speak again. What Emma has done is not just morally wrong. It's illegal. Identity fraud, corporate sabotage, defamation. She's ruined lives. The words felt heavy in the air, like a weight pressing down on all of us. Emma's world was crumbling before her eyes. Her carefully crafted image of the perfect daughter, the golden child, was shattered, and she knew it. She could feel it in the air. She could see the disappointment, the anger, the betrayal in our eyes. Please, she said, her voice small, desperate. I'll fix this. I'll quit. I'll resign. I'll leave the company. I'll do anything. Just don't press charges, please. I could hear the desperation in her voice. But I felt nothing but cold indifference. For years, I had let her walk all over me. Always the quiet one, always the one who was told to let things go. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. This time, I had the upper hand. "I'll let you go," I said, my voice calm and measured. "But you'll resign. And whether or not I press charges, well, that depends on my mood." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. The room erupted into chaos. My uncle, who had been quiet up until this point, began to speak rapidly, explaining the gravity of Emma's actions. His voice grew louder, his words harsher as he outlined the legal consequences she faced. My aunt, still crying, couldn't seem to make sense of what had happened. I stayed quiet, watching as the storm raged around me. For the first time in my life, Emma wasn't the center of attention. For the first time, she wasn't the one being defended. And I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me, knowing that justice, finally, was being served. 2 weeks passed. In those days, the whirlwind of emotions slowed. But the consequences of Emma's actions lingered like a storm cloud. Emma was arrested and charged with identity fraud, corporate sabotage, and defamation. The company filed a lawsuit against her for damages. And she lost everything. The once golden child, the person everyone had held up as the ideal, had fallen from grace, and no one in the family came to her defense. Her parents, once her staunchest supporters, were silent. My uncle, too, had distanced himself, the weight of the situation far too much to bear. Sophia's mother had her own battles, dealing with her illness and trying to come to terms with what her daughter had done. What struck me the most, though, was the shift in the family dynamic. For years, I had been invisible, always in the background, never quite good enough. But in that moment, I realized that the real victory was not just in Emma's downfall. It was in the freedom I finally found. The freedom to stand up for myself. To stop being the one who took the back seat. And most of all, the freedom to know that the truth had finally come to light. I didn't take pleasure in Emma's misfortune. But there was a sense of justice that filled the empty space I hadn't realized existed in my life. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about reclaiming my own worth. I looked around the room that day, at my family, and realized something I hadn't before. No matter what happens, no one can ever take away your dignity, your hard work, and your truth. And that, I knew, was the greatest lesson of all. If you enjoyed this life story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos and stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of the power of resilience.